The employees most likely to struggle with change aren't always your weakest performers. Actually, they're often your strongest. And that's exactly why leaders miss it, because they're your confident employees and they're starting to doubt themselves, but they rarely say it out loud. Instead, it sounds like, I'm not sure we're ready for this. This seems risky. I just think we need more time, and honestly, I'm not even convinced this will really work. Leaders hear resistance, but what if their hearing is actually uncertainty? What if the employee everyone sees as confident is quietly wondering, what if I'm not successful in this new world? Because one of the biggest misconceptions about change is that confident people fear it less. In reality, they are the ones who often have more to lose. And that's what we're talking about today. Why confident employees quietly dread the change. And why one of the most important leadership's responses isn't convincing, it's support. If we haven't met before, I'm Tina Code, founder of Change Decoded. I've spent my career helping leaders turn ambitious visions into lasting results, guiding teams through technology transformations, acquisitions, organizational change, and periods of significant growth. And if there's one thing those experiences have taught me, it's this. Transformation isn't something that happens to an organization. It happens through its people. Because organizations don't transform, people do. And when people respond to change, they're often communicating information along the way. That's the foundation of Resistance Decoder, a framework designed to help leaders understand what different forms of resistance are actually trying to tell us. In this series, we're exploring the different resistance themes and the leadership responses that help decode them. And today's theme is emotional resistance, the resistance that says, I don't know if I'll be successful. And the leadership response is simple. It's support. Before people can perform confidently in a new future, they need help navigating from the uncertainty that comes from getting there. Before we dive in, I want to let you know that I've created a free change agent toolkit to help leaders just like yourself identify resistance signals and respond more effectively during transformation. You'll find that link in the description below. One of the questions I get asked most often is, why is change so hard? And my answer is usually simple, because we're human. And what I mean by that is humans are wired for predictability and safety. Our brains are constantly searching and looking for patterns. We create routines that help us build confidence through repetition. We've learned what works along the way, and we become comfortable with what we know because familiar feels safe. But transformation disrupts that comfort. It asks people to learn new skills, adopt new behaviors, work in new ways, collaborate differently, and often redefine what success looks like. And that can be uncomfortable, not because people are weak, not because they're resistant, but because they're human. One of my favorite reminders is this: change isn't a system update, it's a people update. Organizations often focus on implementation. They focus on the technology, the process, the timeline, the milestones. But that's not what people experience. People experience uncertainty. They're wondering, will I be able to do this? Will I still be good at my job? Will people still see me as capable? Will I still belong? Did you hear that? Those weren't process questions. Those are human questions. And when leaders focus exclusively on implementation, they often miss the emotional experience happening underneath it. One of the reasons emotional resistance is easy to miss is because people rarely say, I'm afraid I won't be successful. Instead, it shows up indirectly. You may hear things like, I'm not sure this is going to work. I think the group needs more training. I just don't think we're ready yet. Or sometimes it doesn't sound like anything at all. People get quieter. They stop volunteering their ideas. They've participated less, and they withdrew from the work sessions. Underneath many of these reactions is a simple question: what if I can't do this? And that's a very different message than I don't want to do this. One of the easiest ways to identify emotional resistance is to listen for language that signals uncertainty. Listen for phrases like, I'm worried, what if, or I'm not sure. Those aren't always objections. Sometimes they're requests for confidence. Sometimes they're requests for support, and sometimes they're requests for reassurance. The challenge is that leaders often hear hesitation and assume opposition. But hesitation and opposition are not the same thing. One is saying, I won't. The other is saying, I don't know if I can. And those require very different responses. This is one of the most overlooked aspects of change. The employees who appear most confident are often the ones experiencing the greatest disruption. Why? Because they've spent years becoming successful, years becoming the expert and the person others rely on. They've spent those years building confidence through mastery. And then change arrives. And suddenly they're learning again. They're uncertain again, and they're making mistakes again. And they themselves have questions that they don't know the answers to. In many ways, they're returning to a beginner's mindset. And that can feel uncomfortable. Not because they don't want to grow, but because growth requires temporarily becoming less certain than you were before. That very thing that made them successful yesterday no longer guarantees success tomorrow. And that can be unsettling. Here's something I remind leaders all the time. If change feels hard, that isn't always a bad thing. In fact, it may be evidence that something meaningful is happening. Growth requires stretching beyond comfort zones. Learning requires uncertainty. Transformation requires challenging familiar patterns. If change feels easy all the time, it's not actually transformational. It's just simply incremental. The discomfort people feel is often evidence that they're moving into something new. So the goal isn't to eliminate all discomfort. The goal is to help people move through it. And that's why I developed the resistance decoder that I dive into in the video popping up. Let's make this practical. Imagine you've just announced a major technology transformation. One employee immediately starts asking for more training. Where's the documentation? What do I need to do to prepare? More opportunities to practice along the way. The project team may interpret this as resistance. But what if they're not resisting? What if they're trying to build that confidence and be ready for the change? What if they're worried about making mistakes? What if they're worried about losing the reputation that they've worked so hard to earn over the years? And now that conversation changes. Instead of asking, why are they resisting? We start asking, what support do they need in order to feel successful? And that's a much more productive question. This is why the leadership response to emotional resistance is support. It's not pressure. It's not persuasion. It's not telling people to just get over it. Support. Support looks like providing clarity, offering training, normalizing the learning curves, helping people see that uncertainty is part of growth. Sometimes people don't need more motivation. They need more confidence. And confidence is often built through support, not speeches. When leaders misinterpret emotional resistance, they often assume people lack commitment. But that's rarely what's happening. The employee who seems hesitant may be protecting their confidence. The employee who seems skeptical may be worried about failure. The employee who appears disengaged may simply feel overwhelmed. If we misread those signals, we risk pushing people away at the exact moment they need support the most. And when that happens, people often stop asking for help. They stop raising concerns and they stop engaging. Not because they're committed to failure, but because they've lost confidence that they'll succeed. One of the most important things leaders can do is normalize the experience. Recognize that difficult days are part of transformation. Some days will feel like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Make sure to celebrate the wins, because progress builds confidence. Acknowledge the tough moments, because pretending change is easy doesn't make it easier. Create communities where people can learn together, because confidence grows faster when people feel that they aren't alone. And when progress feels slow, remind people why the change matters. Because purpose helps people push through uncertainty. The biggest shift emotional resistance asks us to make as leaders is this: stop asking, why are people resisting? And start asking, what support do my people need in order to be successful? Because emotional resistance isn't usually saying, I won't do this. It's often saying, I don't know if I can do this. And those are two very different conversations. The next time someone seems hesitant during change, pause before assuming they're resistant and ask yourself, are they struggling with the change or are they struggling with uncertainty? Because remember, humans are wired for predictability. Transformation challenges our comfort zones, and uncertainty often feels like risk. That's not a flaw, that's part of being human. The good news is that leaders who understand this can create environments where people feel supported as they grow. And that's where transformation becomes possible. If this video was helpful, subscribe to the channel and download the free Change Agent Toolkit using the link in the description below. And let me know in the comments, what's one thing you've seen help people build confidence during change? Until next time, remember, resistance is information. Every response to change is a signal. The job of a leader is to decode the message. I'm here to help. Let's decode change together and lead change inside and out.